So we've warmed up the shot using this adjustment layer. Let's reveal more of the sky detail using another levels adjustment layer. And to do that, target the background layer, grab this tool here, which is the quick selection tool, hit tab to get rid of any floating windows, and then just draw in the sky very quickly to make a rough and ready selection of the sky area. We can now add a new adjustment layer, and it will use the selection to create a mask. Go to levels. Here's levels 2, and you can see a black and white mask. So the white means that we're only going to adjust the sky. The black foreground area is going to be remaining untouched by any adjustments that we make down here. So drag the shadows input slider to the right to darken the sky, and you can see that it's getting much darker now. So around about 130 maybe will give us a nice dark sky. Let me just turn those off for the moment, and you can see lovely texture and detail is being brought back, but just into the sky. Now we've got a problem here. Because I've adjusted the top section here but not the sea, you can see a nasty line between the two sections. Let me just press Z for the zoom tool and click to zoom in, and you've got this nasty jagged line. There's also a bit of a fringe around the top of the hill here. So what we're going to do is use a brush tool by clicking here. Let's choose a nice brush of around about 300 pixels. Set opacity to around about 40% to make it grey instead of a black brush. And then what we can do is click on the mask and gently spray our grey brush over these areas here. And as you keep spraying, it slowly but surely makes the problem areas become transparent, and it blends the darkened top with the original pixels on the layer below. Let's just shrink the brush down by using the left square bracket and just gently darken that fringe a little bit, or lighten it rather, so it blends more effectively with the rest of the shot. Okay, so there we have a more subtle join rather than the really thick sharp line that we had before. Let me just press Z for the zoom tool again and right click to fit on screen. And then what we'll do is hit tab to get the floating windows up, and we're going to make another mask to isolate the foreground so I can lighten that up without changing the sky. And I can create that mask based on the one we've already made by pressing Control and clicking on the mask to bring back the selection, then going to select inverse, and we now have a selection of the foreground. So let's darken up the shadows of the foreground a little bit by dragging this to around about 20. You can see the shadows of the landscape are getting darker, but the sky is not being touched thanks to the mask. Here we go. Now let's brighten up the highlights here to bring out some of these highlight sections by remapping the brightest parts of the shot by dragging this down to the left. And you can see the highlights now are getting much whiter. We can bring in a wee bit more mid-tone detail by dragging this to the left a little bit to around about 120. Now let's turn that on and off to show you what it's doing. It's just improving the contrast of that section there. Now if I hide these floating windows, you can see we've got a little bit of a problem here because we've also lightened this section of the sky. So what I need to do is to target levels 3's mask, make sure we've got the brush tool, and then maybe take the opacity up to something a little bit stronger like 91, and let's just spray to remove these areas from the adjustment. And I'm also going to lighten, or rather darken I should say, these hills as well, because the haze doesn't need to be blown out anymore. It's already quite blown out, so we don't need to lighten those areas. So just spray on those to darken them and reveal a little bit more of the tonal detail, like so. So great things, masks. They allow you to lighten or darken things, dodge and burn quite non-destructively to create a much more effective looking shot. There we go. That's fixed some of that tone there in the background. And now if I turn the top layer on and off, you can see we've still got a nice contrast change here, but the hills aren't being altered because they're being protected by these new brush strokes.